There will now be an opportunity for silent prayer or meditation. Please be seated. The Secretary will read the order.
Debate on vote number 27, Environmental Affairs.
I now invite the Honourable Minister of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries to address the House. The Honourable Minister.
Honourable House Chair, Honourable Deputy Minister, Ms. Makgotso Sotyu, Honourable Figile Xasa, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee, Honourable Members of the Portfolio Committee, Members of the Executive Councils of Provinces, the Director General, Ms. Nosipho Nqaba, Chairpersons and Chief Executives of public entities, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to table before this House today the first budget policy statement for the Department of Environment, soon to also include forestry and fisheries. Just 6 weeks ago, President Cyril Ramaphosa acknowledged at his inauguration that South Africans had on the 8th of May this year chosen hope over hopelessness. He said that we all want action and not just words and promises. That it is through action we will create the society for which so many have fought and sacrificed and for which all of us yearn. During the course of this 6th administration, ladies and gentlemen, this government has prioritized actions that will promote social and economic transformation, fight poverty, inequality, and create work, particularly for those entering the labor market for the first time. Ours is a collective vision of a South Africa where no person goes hungry, where our economy grows faster than our population, where 2 million more young people will be in employment, where our schools will have better educational outcomes and violent crime will be halved. From an environmental perspective, it is our mandate to facilitate an economic growth path that is equitable, inclusive, sustainable, and environmentally sound. A path that, in line with our Constitution, promotes sustainable development and the right of all to enjoy an environment that is not harmful to our health or well-being. Our debate takes place today in a context in which, in recent times, the world has seen school children, including in our own country, organizing strikes to demonstrate against adult inaction to address the risks of irreversible and dangerous climate change, the risks that these pose to their futures. These young people insist that we talk about a climate emergency and not just about climate change. Their actions are motivated by an understanding that global warming and its resultant climate change threatens the underpinnings of our economies and our social fabric. The youth insist that taking such action to keep global temperatures below a 1.5 centigrade rise over pre-industrial levels is essential for our survival as humankind. In his State of the Nation address 3 weeks ago, President Cyril Ramaphosa said, "Together with all the nations of the world, we are confronted by the most devastating changes in global climate in human history. The extreme weather conditions associated with the warming of the atmosphere threaten our economy. They threaten the lives and livelihoods of our people, and unless they act now, they will threaten our very existence." Ladies and gentlemen, more than 2 million South Africans are directly dependent on natural resources and the natural environment for their income. These figures include almost 900,000 who work in agriculture, 600,000 who depend on fisheries and activities linked to our oceans, and almost 400,000 who rely on various aspects of the biodiversity economy. Hundreds of thousands more are employed in the value chains associated with these industries. When we take into account that each of these breadwinners probably supports between 8 and 10 others, we start to understand the true significance of our natural resources to our economic and our social well-being. These natural assets are under unprecedented threat from climate change, excuse me, environmental degradation, and the loss of our biodiversity. We know that here, as elsewhere in the world, those living under conditions of poverty and vulnerability will be hardest hit by drought, floods, and extreme temperatures. These people will also have the least capacity to adapt to climate change. These realities have been recognized by the Global Risks Report tabled at successive meetings of the World Economic Forum in Davos. Since 2012, climate change, extreme weather events, water supply crises have featured in the top 5 risks in terms of both likelihood of these events occurring and the consequences of their happening. But all is not lost. For the first time, the world has agreed on a set of sustainable development goals that have turned the often misused term of sustainable development into a real and practical vision for the future. A practical vision that is clearly reflected in our National Development Plan Vision 2030. Our country will submit its first voluntary report on progress we have made in implementing the SDGs later this month. We are living at a time when renewable energy technology is becoming both more effective and cheaper by the day, a time when electric vehicles are becoming mainstream, an era when a circular economy is a practical and affordable alternative to the unsustainable take, make, use, dispose model that is at the root of many of our current problems. The National Development Plan requires us to leave future generations an environmental endowment of at least equal value to the one we have now. No single government department, entity, or municipality can do this alone. The work of building a sustainable and environmentally sound growth path is the work of the nation as a whole. It will require all spheres of government, business, organized labor, and civil society to come together in a program of joint action. In line with our understanding that our climate change response has to involve all sectors of society, the second draft of our climate change bill is currently being discussed and debated at NEDLAC. The bill aims to create a framework to implement the Vision 2030 call for a just transition to a climate-resilient and lower-carbon economy and society. Hence, its objectives are to provide a coordinated and integrated response to climate change, to provide for the effective management of inevitable climate change impacts, and to make a fair contribution to the global effort to stabilize greenhouse gas concentrations. Right now, such far-reaching change is hard to imagine. Society at large is worried about immediate issues of energy security, job losses, and retrenchments. This means that while we debate the climate change bill, we must of necessity also discuss the objectives and the process of the just transition itself, and ensure that it takes place in an orderly manner. We must tread this, our future path towards 2050, while maintaining energy security and creating employment. We must begin now to invest in essential research and development to create the new businesses and skills needed. This will enable existing industries and their workforces to proactively manage change in ways that create new jobs and create growth. Teamwork and partnerships must also guide how we ensure that we comply with our national ambient air quality standards. In the priority areas of the Highveld, Vaal Triangle, and Waterberg, the public are calling for immediate action. At our strategic planning session this past Monday, we already agreed to review our priority area air quality management plans and their implementation. Going forward, we must set up a multi-stakeholder implementation partnership including at the highest levels of government. I have already written to Minister Mantashe and Minister Gordon in this regard. The management of waste, and in particular single-use plastic, is a matter that also requires our most urgent and pressing attention. Our plastic bag regulations and the plastic bag levy are two mechanisms government has used to influence consumer behavior and reduce littering. This is clearly not sufficient. The department is currently assessing single-use plastic products, and we will be conducting various stakeholder engagements in this regard. We want to see consumers challenging their favorite stores. We want to see retailers challenging their suppliers, and we want to see suppliers coming up with real and sustainable solutions. With the proper coordination and consumer action, voluntary change can be both sustainable and cost-effective. Happily, our plastics industry is already looking at local innovations to give these products a second sustainable life, amongst others in the building, construction, and furniture-making industries. Importantly, the global plastic waste crisis challenges the take, make, use, dispose approach to production and consumption. There is no waste in a circular economy. When we have finished with something, it becomes the raw material for something else. Our chemicals and waste economy, Pakisa, is the key circular economy component of our just transition to a fully sustainable development. The plan includes increasing the volume of waste diverted from landfills to beneficiation processes. As agreed at the Job Summit in October 2018, the department is studying 49 applications for the beneficiation of waste, including slag from the ferrochrome sector, ash from combustion plants, gypsum, paper, and cardboard. While we find ways to reduce waste in our landfills, we must also find ways to clean up our communities and improve our public open spaces. When President Ramaphosa launched the Good Green Deeds program earlier this year, he spoke about Rwanda, a country where the community takes pride in keeping their public spaces clean. Many provincial and local governments already have cleanup campaigns. Our intention is that under the banner of the Good Green Deeds campaign, we should unite and massify these campaigns into a national effort to clean up our country. South Africa is one of the 30 driest countries in the world. This phenomena has been intensified by a prolonged drought. A critical program aimed at improving water security is the control of invasive plants in our catchments and wetlands. Recent research estimates that protection and clearing of river catchments can increase our water supply by as much as 1/6, at a fraction of the cost of other projects such as desalination. The Working for Water program has cleared and maintained almost 3.5 million hectares of land over the last 25 years. And this work will be intensified this year in both our key catchment and wetland areas, with 190 wetlands scheduled for repair. Wetlands and estuaries also play a crucial role in flood management. Accordingly, the department is working with other affected departments and entities on a joint wetlands framework to improve wetland protection, management, and conservation in an integrated manner. This year, our environmental programs will create 67,000 work opportunities. A particular emphasis is on assisting young people in rural areas to enter the labor market for the first time, and accordingly, 65% of all opportunities will be set aside for those under the age of 35. Much more work must be done to ensure that as youth exit these programs, they have been adequately equipped for permanent productive activity. We are fortunate that our country has a well-developed suite of policy and legislation for the management, conservation, and sustainable use of biodiversity. Preserving our natural wealth for future generations complements and contributes to our nation's scientific achievements as we finalize a new 140,000 hectare national park around the square kilometer array in the Northern Cape. Illegal poaching and illicit wildlife trade continue to threaten both our conservation and sustainable use efforts. Accordingly, the time has come for us to review our efforts together with our sisters in the Security and Justice Cluster. We need better controls at our ports of exit, more support in the war on the ground, and faster prosecution of offenders. We must also redouble our efforts to make sure that communities who live on the borders of our parks benefit from conservation and the biodiversity economy, so they are not vulnerable to recruitment by syndicated poaching operations. Accordingly, the department has set ambitious targets to transform the biodiversity economy during the 6th administration. As part of the national stimulus package, our department is supporting 107 projects with infrastructure such as game fencing, water reticulation, game donations, training, and capacity building for new and emerging game farmers. To optimize the economic development and job creation potential of our indigenous plant wealth, initiatives like the Bioproducts Advancement Network of South Africa are aimed at working with industry and conservation to ensure that rural women in particular benefit from both the intellectual property rights of indigenous knowledge systems and the cultivation and harvesting of indigenous plants. Our flagship Oceans Pakisa program has so far contributed 120 billion, or 4.5% to our GDP. Currently, it sustains 676,000 jobs across the ocean-related sectors. By 2024, we hope that the facilitated ocean economic activities and investments will contribute 143 billion to GDP and sustain 780,000 jobs. The recently gazetted network of 20 new marine protected areas increases our protective refuges of our exclusive economic zone, and this will help sustain fisheries for long-term food and job security. It is important at this point, honorable members, to repeat the point that we made in the interaction we had with those from fishing communities about 3 weeks ago, where we said that we would review the FRAP 2020 process, which will see the reissuing of licenses for 12 of the 22 fisheries. This decision has been taken following consultation with the sector and is aimed at ensuring that we follow all regulatory and legislative requirements. It is essential that the process is seen to be fair, open, and transparent. It must promote the transformation of the sector and create sustainable livelihoods for the many coastal communities who have no other means of support. The process to transfer both fisheries and forestry to our department is at an advanced stage. Honourable members, effective compliance and enforcement underpins environmental justice and the integrity of our regulatory system. Upholding environmental rights and combating environmental crime in all its forms contributes to our efforts as a government to ensure social cohesion, safety, and security. At the same time, as part of the collective effort to reduce the impact red tape has on economic activity, we are consolidating and streamlining regulatory processes, automating permitting, and developing other applications to reduce the cost of compliance. We have also embarked on a program of strategic environmental assessments to support the strategic integrated projects and government priority areas. As I conclude, allow me to thank the Director General and her team, as well as all of those who work in our agencies, for their ongoing commitment to environmental protection and the sustainable use of our natural resources. Honourable members, this is the month of July, a month when we traditionally honour our former head of state and father of our nation, the late President Nelson Rolihlahla Mandela. For this reason, I thought it fitting to end with his wise words. He said, and I quote, "Our people are bound up with the future of the land. Our national renewal depends upon the way we treat our land, our water, our sources of energy, and the air we breathe. Let us restore our country in a way that satisfies our descendants and ourselves." I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. The next speaker is the Honourable Kasa.
Chairperson, Honorable Minister Barbara Creasy, Honorable Deputy Minister Maggie Sochu, honorable members, especially members of the committee, the environmental sector family, ladies and gentlemen. May I take this moment to extend to all of you, on behalf of the Portfolio Committee on Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, a warm welcome to this first annual debate of the budget vote for the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. We would like to clarify the fact that specifically we are focusing on budget vote 27, budget for the Department of Environmental Affairs. The Minister has tried to clarify the process as to how and when are we likely to deal with everything else that constitute the Department of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. Honorable Chairperson, I would like to start this debate by thanking all the members of the Portfolio Committee for their integrity, diligence and intellectual vigor and the frankness with which they participated in the discussion of the budget. I foresee us working together irrespective of our political affiliation. We might not always agree on certain details of how certain things have to be done, but there is much hope for us to agree on strategic issues pertaining to the environment, because the environment sustainability benefits us all, and environmental damage imposes great social cost on us all and affects our international image as a country. It is in this context that I am truly grateful to all of the members of the committee and look forward to further constructive interactions with you as we decisively represent our people. Honorable Chair, I would like to repeat and support the departmental prognosis that the department is a high-performing department that serves with integrity as the custodian of South Africa's environment that should be bequeathed to the future generations in a manner that encourages its sustainability indefinitely. Although being new in the committee, we could still see that the department had established a very good record of unqualified audit opinions ever since it came into existence as a separate department in 2010-2011 financial year until the two past financial years when the department started experiencing serious challenges in meeting audit requirements. As they relate to modified cash standards, we know that those challenges occurred due to classification of transfer of payments that the department annually makes to expanded public works program projects. Therefore, in essence, the department's challenges have rather been of an accounting nature. They don't talk to the issue of integrity. However, having interacted with you, Honorable Minister, and your team during the processing of the budget, we are satisfied that the department is in capable hands, considering the caliber of the executive management and your technical personnel under your leadership and authority, and also your assurance to the members of the committee that the matter of clean audit was receiving your personal attention. We recognize that the department fulfills its mandate mainly through policy making on matters of the environment, and also through coordination and monitoring of the implementation of national environmental policies, programs, and legislation. with additional support from its 4 entities: Isimangaliso Wetland Parks Authority, South African National Biodiversity Institute, South African National Parks, and the South African Weather Services. We considered and appreciated the purposeful structuring of the department's 7 programs to ensure the effective achievement of its constitutional mandate. It is easy to see that the 7 different programs and their purposes are reflective of the different focus areas in the light of ongoing challenges that face all the different aspects of our environment. Honorable Chairperson, the South African environment is a vehicle for many key sectors that constitute a core part of our national economic engine. For example, the way in which we respond to the threats of climate change would influence whether we can continue to export our agricultural produce to our traditional markets up north without being subjected to carbon border tax adjustments. Similarly, the way how we manage our biodiversity and maintain our status as an iconic diversity conservation destination country would define whether we continue to receive increasing numbers of international tourists or not. The environment does more than just providing raw materials for economic production. It is in this regard that we argue that the contribution of the environment must be holistically evaluated in deciding the levels of funding for this invaluable sector, considering the supportive nature of this sector to other economically viable sectors, and also the positive impact the environment has on our well-being or health, which the Constitution clearly stated in Section 24, subsection A, that, I quote, "Everyone has a right to an environment that is not harmful to their health or well-being." In concluding, I would like to indicate that as chairperson of the committee and as a member of the African National Congress, hopefully on behalf of the Portfolio Committee, we support the budget vote of 7.5 billion to the Department of Environmental Affairs. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Lorimer.
Mr. Chair, there are some things we look for from this portfolio. First, it must work out how South Africa's environmental resource can be harnessed in the best way to provide a path out of poverty for as many of our people as possible. Use of the environment must be sustainable, or it's pointless. Government must ensure that in climbing out of poverty, we do not create a wasteland that is unhealthy or not worth living in. Unique aspects of our environmental legacy are a birthright that our citizens should have an opportunity to experience. Money allocated for these tasks must be well spent. A first look at the department charged with these tasks shows a decidedly mixed bag. I understand that it is natural not to talk about your failures, but the absence of the word adverse in relation to its audit findings from the department's report to last week's committee meetings was amateurish and has presented a credibility problem that will endure. What was strange was the ANC's rather muted reaction to this. We've heard the chairman's over-generous attitude towards the department in this regard. This is billions of rands of the people's money. The department missed the deadline to submit its figures. The AG doesn't know where the money went. This is not some small-anyana mistake. This is a big deal. Mumbled explanations about a change in accounting practices do not hide the vast amounts of money that can't be properly accounted for. This amounts to managerial incompetence on a massive scale. If we can't trust the department to be straight with Parliament as it conducts oversight, it will cast doubt on everything the department does. Corruption is powered by graft, encouraged by a lack of consequence, and enabled by mismanagement. This must be cleaned up and quickly. If you want to start to tackle corruption, you need look no further than the award of a South African National Parks tender to Tebe Tourism for the Salati Railway Bridge Hotel development at Skukuza in the Kruger National Park. In case anybody needs reminding, Tebe Tourism is a subsidiary of Tebe Investments, of which the largest shareholder at almost 50% is the Batu Batu Trust. The sole beneficiary of the Batu Batu Trust is the African National Congress. So here you have the ANC government running an entity, Sandparks, which gives a tender to itself. That's not quite criminal behavior, but it should be. It's certainly unethical. The officials involved in the award of this tender should be investigated and disciplined. If you do this, it'll show that you're serious about oversight. If the minister is truly concerned with outing the rot in the entities in her new department, she should introduce lifestyle audits of officials and follow through investigations of those who have unexplained wealth. It doesn't have to be everybody, but if you do a random number of officials every month, it will soon encourage better behavior. In his State of the Nation speech, the President put forward the ambitious plan of doubling our tourism in the next 11 years. It's a laudable aim and speaks directly to an area where this department can most impact our unemployment crisis. If we are to receive tourists, many of whom will come to view our rich wildlife heritage, we will need to expand the land area that is allocated to protected conservation areas. We will be urging the authorities to focus on this as a major goal. I hope this is part of the plan the Minister spoke of. There are many areas of the country that have the potential to be declared national parks or to be conservancies, some of which can be privately owned, that could be integrated with our national park system to create large areas where biodiversity can be enhanced and protected. Now, it's going to be important when we do this to ensure that areas designated for preservation are not degraded by other activities. To this end, I believe we should be looking at legislation that ensures a barrier zone that will keep activities like mining away from the direct boundaries of our parks. A case in point is the proposal for a giant coal mine directly on the southern border of the Kruger National Park. This is an area which provides major tourism earnings which could be destroyed if the noise and dust of an open pit were recklessly permitted. Barrier zone legislation that specifies exact exclusion zones around exactly which protected areas will provide a degree of legislative certainty for prospective miners that is currently missing. There's another anomaly in our mining licensing process where the mining department is also the authorizing authority on environmental permits for mines. The Department of Mineral Resources, or DME as it is now, does not have the expertise or the capacity to properly perform this function. I know I've just spent 7 years on that portfolio. It should be carried out by people who can do it. That means the Department of the Environment, as is the case, incidentally, with the majority of mining jurisdictions worldwide. Mining has left a historic legacy of environmental damage. When things go wrong, as with the disgraceful official neglect of the bad operational practices at Mintails on the West Rand, the environmental authorities should be empowered and capacitated to act. The business rescue practitioners have no duty to account for environmental damage. In the end, the liability will become the problem of the environmental authority. Efforts to amend rules covering this situation should be fast-tracked. South Africa's natural heritage is an asset that belongs to all of our people. When somebody poaches a rhino, they are stealing from all of our people. But are we winning the battle against rhino poaching? We don't know. The official line seems to be that poaching has declined, but by how much? Some of it may be due to improved law enforcement, but there's the disquieting suggestion that rhino poaching is down because there are simply fewer rhino for poachers to find in our national parks. It's time for the department to be transparent about this issue. We need to know how many rhino are left in our national parks and whether their numbers are growing or shrinking. If they're shrinking, the department needs to come up with a plan that will save the future of the rhino. There are other forms of wildlife trafficking too, which need to be given more attention than they are currently getting. These are just a few of the big issues that confront our environment. My colleagues will focus on others. These issues need to be addressed, and the place to start is ensuring an honest and capable department. Until that happens, Minister, chances of success are regrettably remote.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Paulson.
Baie dankie. Ek weet nie wat sê die tannie met die stikkende hare hier in die hoekie nie. Good afternoon, Chairperson
On a
and
point of order, Chairperson.
What's the
members
point of order, honourable member?
Please ask the member to withdraw. I know he didn't mention a name, but he pointed directly and used derogatory terms.
Yeah, I heard someone here in the
Honourable,
corner.
no, wait,
I'm not going to pay attention to this
honourable,
nonsense. Chairperson,
no.
I've
Honourable
got
Honourable Paulson.
yeah.
Let's observe the rules of the House. Withdraw the remark, please. We
Chairperson,
refer to members
this
in
lady
respectful
made
terms.
a stupid comment here, the idiot with a broken hair. But anyway, I
Withdraw the
withdraw.
remark.
Okay,
Thank you.
let me.
Continue, honourable member.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. The White Walkers are hounding me today. Chairperson, I like the name of this department, Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, EFF. And you're all welcome and congratulations, Minister, on your appointment as Minister of EFF. Chairperson, at this moment, more than at any time in history, we are faced with the greatest threat to human existence the world has ever known. Human-induced global warming will completely change the world as we know it and force us to reimagine our existence. One of the most tragic consequences of our fixation with consumer-driven development has been our inability to imagine and implement a developmental program that prioritizes the protection of the integrity of our ecosystem. We face challenges of global warming and climate variability, loss of biodiversity, deforestation, desertification, land degradation, waste and littering, population growth, urbanization, pollution, poverty, and health hazards. While South Africa is seen to be doing more than its counterparts in engendering an environmental awareness ethic, we can do better and ought to do better only if we can eliminate corruption and narrow short-termism in the manner the department does its operations. Here in South Africa, the root cause of the environmental crisis is located in the racial dispossession of African land. The colonial creation of national parks and nature reserves and the ownership of land and property by a tiny settler minority. This has led to millions of South Africans staying in rat-infested, flea-ridden shacks in areas like Joslova here in Cape Town, where they don't get much services from the DA-run Cape Town, as well as Alexandra in Johannesburg, also run by the DA. In many other townships, these townships have no space for even planting trees. In areas in Mpumalanga and around Johannesburg, we have a real problem of acid mine drainage. And despite there being legal provisions to prevent this, there is no real desire from the government to rein these companies in. We need the Department of EFF to have the mandate and the willingness to go hard on mining companies. Must go hard. That do not exercise care to guarantee 0% pollution of our water resources and prevent acid mine drainage. Mining companies must be legally held accountable and must be made to pay for the damages for any of their activities and to people's lives. Those mines found to be still using silicosis-causing compounds must have their mining licenses revoked. This must apply to other notorious polluters as well. Sasol must be forced to pay reparations to the people of Sasolburg, who are at the receiving end of pollution from the Sasol plant there. While facing this environmental crisis, our environmental agencies have progressively weakened by both the ANC and the DA. Here in the Western Cape, the Provincial Conservation Agency, Cape Nature, decided to dissolve their scientific services, which was the bedrock of conservation planning and research. There is no plausible justification for this. In the Eastern Cape Parks and Tourism Agency has been over the years reduced into a cash cow for its now departing CEO. At a national level, the South African National Biodiversity Institute has been beset by poor leadership, racism, and the inability to retain skilled black people. These institutions are in crisis and require bold leadership. Now, Minister, I'm going to give you the advice I give any new minister. If you really want to make a difference, you must fear nothing, especially not white monopoly capital. At a practical policy level, there are immediate things that can be done to fight against environmental degradation, and these are rapidly increase the protected area network to ensure that all representative ecosystems unique to South Africa are preserved and protected. Integrate local community forums in the management of protected areas to ensure that local people are not excluded from the management of protected areas in their localities. Streamline environmental authorization procedures to ensure that the Department of EFF becomes the only authority that is able to grant authorization for mining, property development, and other forms of development. Environmental impact assessments must not be nice to have assessments. They must be authoritative. Through strengthened legislation, ensure that mining companies that have abandoned mines are forced to come back and rehabilitate denuded mining landscapes. Officially adopt the civil society-driven 1 million climate jobs initiative as a government program and promote the transitioning South Africa from coal-based energy sources to renewable energy. Introduce a massive tree planting campaign across the country. Planting trees is the only defense we have against climate change. And give tax incentives to companies that will subsidize tree planting activities around areas where they operate. Use only establishments that have demonstrated commitment to using clean energy and recycling of water and other disposables. Your budget, Minister, unfortunately, lacks imagination. The EFF, therefore, rejects this budget.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Singh.
I didn't start yet. The time is showing.
Honourable members. Continue, Honourable Singh.
Thank you very much, Honourable Chairperson.
Honourable Singh, my apologies.
Why are you rising, Honourable Member?
Yes, Chairperson. If these guys here on this side are not going to behave, I'm going to make them behave. So you must tell them.
No, I think what you should do is you raise the issues with me. And I'm in charge of the session, and I will make sure they behave.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Chairperson, would you spare me then and make them behave?
Have a seat. Thank you very much. Continue, Honourable Singh.
On behalf of the IFP, I firstly wish to congratulate the Minister and the Deputy Minister on your respective appointments to this very critical portfolio. Make no mistake about it, Ministers, we are in deep overdraft with respect to the demands we as humanity are placing on this planet's natural resources. We err continuously on the side of economic growth before environmental sustainability, despite the growing body of evidence suggesting otherwise. In essence, short-term wins that overshadow long-term goals, ultimately leading to final losses. We are the principal actors in the ongoing poisoning of our environment through the use of GMOs, and here I refer to GMO maize, and weed killers such as glyphosate, and even through the use of other technologies such as the possible dangers posed by 5G technology, communication networks, which combined could very well be of extreme detriment, not only to our health and well-being now, but more importantly to that of our future generations. Independent environment and health studies need to be urgently conducted by your department, Minister, in this regard. The precautionary principle needs to be applied before it's too late in order to properly implement forward planning mechanisms. Well, Chairperson, Mr. Gaylord Nelson aptly states that, and I quote, "The ultimate test of man's conscience may be his willingness to sacrifice something today for the future generations whose words of thanks will not be heard," close quote. Chairperson, such a tipping point is upon us. We can either take heed or we can ignore it and place our societies and planet in what Ms. Inga Anderson from UNEP described in a recent address as, quote unquote, imminent peril. Next week, our country will present its first progress report on Sustainable Development Goals, which will give us an indication of our progress as a nation towards 169 targets agreed upon by 193 UN member states. Have we done enough? Where are we doing well and where are we failing? We shall see on the 17th of July. In the words of President Ramaphosa, now is it, and I quote, now is the time for implementation, not rhetoric. We are at the precipice and we must exercise environmental precaution in all we do. This is paramount. Chairperson, science must inform and underpin all that we do as a country regarding environmental legislation and regulation. I now turn to marine protected areas, which the Honourable Minister referred to, and credit must be given to former Minister Edna Malewa, may her soul rest in peace, for her working in increasing MPAs from 0.43% to 0.5% in South Africa. We as the IFP would like to see this percentage at least double in the coming 5 years. And credit must also go to our new minister, Ms. Barbara Creasy, for her swift action in suspending the octopus fishing licenses issued in False Bay after numerous and unnecessary deaths of iconic whale species that occurred in the bay, when whales became entangled in octopus trap lines. This practice must be banned for its damage, not only to the decimation of octopus numbers in the area, but also in respect of the collateral damage to other iconic marine life species in the bay. We hope the removal of these traps will be expedited. False Bay must be protected and designated a marine protected area, Minister. In moving forward, this department must ensure a balance between economic growth and sustainable development, the protection of biodiversity, the development of clean energy, and the reduction of air pollution. Single-use plastics must be banned immediately, and the foundations must firmly be laid for a sustainable, healthy, and thriving environment. We must accelerate our resolve to stop elephant and rhino poaching, as well as canned lion hunting. A United Nations report on this issue suggests that, and I quote, many multinational criminal networks are making phenomenal profits from environmental crime. It is a financing machine, close quote. Our effectiveness to deal with this scourge must be accompanied by properly resourced compliance and enforcement programs. Sadly, this is the least funded departmental program, and therefore, Minister, more needs to be done in this regard. We have but one earth. We share it in common, and we therefore all share the responsibility of its environmental protection now and into perpetuity. Honourable Minister, as the IFP, we support this budget, but we would like to see an increase in the budget so that we can accelerate enforcement, compliance, and ensure that the mandate of this department is properly executed. I thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Boshoff.
Honourable Chairman, honourable members, in quantitative surveys, the academics tells us that respondents tend to regard everything as very important. If you ask them how important their children's health is, it's very important. If you ask them how much time they want to spend or how important time spent with their children is, it's very important. And the quality of food that they eat is also very important. But if you look at the choices that they make in actual fact, it might be that what is very important is to get the children out from under their feet. And that is the way it is with our population regarding environmental affairs. If you ask people how important is biodiversity, it's very important. How important is the sustainable development of our coastlines, of our whole marine environment? It's very important. But in fact, people are not willing to pay if they are given a choice between something which was produced in an environmental sustainable way and the cheaper product of similar qualities but a different and less viable or less sustainable method of production. Therefore, we need, in fact, a Department of Environmental Affairs to be this custodian of the biological and the complete habitat that we are all inhabiting. If it was not necessary, there might have been 7.5 billion rand to spend on something else. And the minister quoted how many people are dependent on the environment for their sustenance. Of course, it's actually also something like 7.2 billion people, because everyone is dependent on our natural environment. Nou ja, terwyl dit so is, moet die Departement van Omgewingsake iets in beskerming neem wat vir ons almal belangrik is. En dit gebeur terwyl daar 'n klimaatskrisis besig is om op ons af te kom soos 'n stoomtrein, en dit lyk asof ons nie wil pad gee nie. Die wetenskaplike kundigheid oor wat nodig is om gedoen te word is algemeen bekend. Dis nie 'n geheim wat ergens weggesteek word nie. Eintlik is dit betreklik eenvoudig. Daar's natuurlik, dis ongelooflik gesofistikeerd ook. Maar op 'n manier kan jy sê, as ons minder koolstofbronne sekwestreer in die vorm van fossielbrandstowwe wat verbrand word, en as ons meer koolsuurgas bind in die vorm van bome of ander meer tegnologiese maniere, dan gaan ons hierdie geweldige groot probleem van klimaatsverandering kan voorkeer. En tog doen ons dit nie. Tog is ons besig met 'n weggooi-ekonomie waar ons eintlik, as ons na ons keuses kyk, nie 'n duiwel kan omgee van wat gebeur met die planeet nie. En dit terwyl ons self en ons nageslag voorstel is om hier te woon. Nou, ek dink as 'n mens vir jouself 'n eenvoudige manier wil kry oor hoe om daarna te kyk, dan kyk 'n mens na die 4 klassieke elemente van aarde, lug, water en vuur. Aarde, is jy besig om die grond op te pas. Enige keuse, of dit nou 'n klein verbruikersitem is of die ontwikkeling van 'n multimiljard rand mynprojek is dit besig om die grond te bevoordeel, of is dit besig om die grond te beroof? Lug, wat stel ons vry in die lug? Wat haal ons uit die lug? Dis baie belangrik, dit gaan oor die atmosfeer. Water, ek dink dis vanselfsprekend, en vuur is ons energiebronne. Dit is ons gebruik van energie in die finale instansie wat besig is om ons bestaan op aarde onmoontlik te maak. Nou dink ek by myself, dis vreeslik lekker om die goedjies te sê. Hier staan ons nou in die parlement, ek kan eintlik niks rondom my sien wat nie uit 'n fabriek uitkom nie, behalwe die mense self. En 'n mens sê vir jouself, waar begin 'n mens? En dan het ek nou nogal gedink, hierdie oulike toestel waarin ons water vervoer, sou dit nie moontlik wees dat die parlement 'n goeie voorbeeld stel en begin om glasbekers met kraanwater op ons tafels neer te sit nie, dan drink ons sommer die gehalte water wat enigiemand anders in die dorp, in die stad drink, ek kom van 'n dorp af, en ons hou op om honderde van hierdie botteltjies in die asblik te gooi elke dag. Ek wil juist graag weet, word hierdie herwin, of beland dit maar net op die Kaapstad se afvalterrein? Ek weet regtig nie, dit interesseer my. Nou ja, op daardie noot wil ek dan baie dankie sê, en mag die toekomstige geslagte nog veilig en gelukkig hier op aarde woon.
The next speaker is the Honorable Deputy Minister of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries. Over to him, Bokod.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. Honorable Minister of Environment, Forestry and Fishery, Ms. Barbara Chrissy, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Environment, Forestry and Fisheries, Honorable Fikile Xhasa, Honorable Members of Parliament and members of the Portfolio Committee, all MECs present here, our Director General, Ms. Nosipho Ngaba, and your team, all board chairs and chief executives of DEFF public entities and our key stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen. One of the key stakeholders who sent letters of congratulations to our new ministry was Greenpeace Africa's Executive Director, Mr. Njeri Kabeberi. This congratulatory letter deserved a special mention, not only because Greenpeace Africa is one of our key stakeholders and partners in discharging our constitutional mandate, that of protecting people's rights to a clean environment as guaranteed by Section 24 of our Constitution, but also because Greenpeace Africa went on specifically and precisely laying out all the issues that need to be prioritized by our newly amalgamated Department of Forestry and Fisheries, specifically mentioning concerns of climate change, air pollution, global warming, ocean vulnerability, and underdeveloped policies and legislations. This is a kind social activism that is much needed by our government, as a healthy environment requires a concerted action from all sectors of our society. Chairperson, thou issues of climate change and pollution and related big words such as the words that we always hear every day, biodiversity and ecosystems, could be quickly seen as just other academic and far-fetched phenomenon from the immediate realities of our communities. Most people have other things to worry about, partly because the grave consequences of climate change and pollution, health hazards, tend to be invisible, yet incremental until suddenly they become catastrophic through natural and unnatural disasters such as typhoons, forest fires, deadly disease, and severe drought. And part of the problem is that these issues of climate change and pollution are either perceived as concerns of other groups of people and nothing to do with immediate societal challenges such as poverty, unemployment, and economic growth, or it is alleged to be a problem of the future. Neither could be further from the truth. The fact of the matter is, biodiversity simply means we need to quickly acknowledge that our existence and survival as the human species solely depend on the normal functioning of our weather system to get good rains for water and sustainability of both the land and sea animal species and plant kingdom. And indeed, this survival also depends on good governance and management of our land to ensure sustainability and sustainable forest for habitable land, fertile soil for human and good security and food security, and animals' survival. This coexistence between humans, animals, and nature is indeed a social cohesion that was already envisioned by our national government with other fellow South African countries way back in 1999, that is the Southern African countries way back in 1999, through the establishment of the Trans-Frontier Conservation Areas, which I will refer to in future as TFCAs. These TFCAs were founded with the aim of collaborative managing shared natural and cultural resources across international boundaries for improved biodiversity conservation, socio-economic development, regional cooperation, and integration for shared natural and cultural resources. When I was appointed as a deputy minister in this department, and I came across these difficult words, and then I was very curious and called upon the DDG responsible for this area and the DG responsible. I said, just explain to me what kind of areas are these areas, just to discover that these are things that we are living with almost every day. And then it reminded me, MEC from the Free State, it reminded me the day when I was still in arts and culture, I visited an area in Forestburg. And where I arrived in Forestburg on issues of arts and culture, and then there were some old women and men who said to me, I will have to wait for them for 2 hours because they've gone into Lesotho along the borders of Forestburg. Apo bathi bayokulanda amayeza esintu. That is the plantation across the borders of Lesotho. And then I said to myself, how come that you leave South Africa and go into Lesotho and get some plantation? Then when I joined this department, then I understand why we needed then to make sure that we look after this kind of our cultural resources. Consequently, the creation of the Kgalagadi Transfrontier Park on the 12th of May 2000 opened the first chapter on the TFCs in Southern Africa. Currently, South Africa is playing a leading role in the collaborative management of 6 transferred conservative areas with Namibia. We know that we have borders with Namibia. Botswana, we have borders with Botswana. Zimbabwe, we know that we have borders with Zimbabwe, especially from the Limpopo side. Lesotho from the Free State side, and Mozambique, Mpumalanga, and Swatini. This TFC's socio-economic growth spin-offs through tourism is undisputable. Many renowned tourism destinations such as Kruger National Park are already situated within these SADC TFCs, which continue to generate economic growth and employment in the surrounding rural communities. And for this financial year, 2019-2020, the department will continue with our SADC partners to consolidate the work being undertaken in the TFCs for the benefit of transboundary biodiversity conservation, to address challenges of rhino poaching, as we all has mentioned that, and illegal animal competition, hunting, to name just a few. We will also explore other transboundary collaboration in the areas of World Heritage Sites and the program on biosphere reserves. Chairperson, the establishment of the TFCAs is a human-made and very progressive. At the same time, their establishment or destruction will also be inevitably due to human activity or behavior and will be catastrophic. Therefore, the good management and clean governance of the natural habitat is critically fundamental. And that is why on the 17th of June this year, South Africa joined the Community of Nations in celebrating the 25 years of advancement of sustainable land management under the auspices of the United Nations Convention to combat desertification. We must know this fact that there will be no TFCs if animals lose their natural habitat through the irresponsible and illegal cutting of trees. Chairperson, it is a well-known proven scientific research that the forests are very important for the sustenance of wildlife, and they play an important role in food chain. Forests also play an important role in the water cycle. They check the flow of running water and cause to percolate through the soil and increasing underground water level. Owing to the numerous benefits and the products of the forest, it can be easily stated that forests are one of the invaluable gifts of nature to the humankind. But the stark reality is that 91% of South Africa is considered a dry land, as the minister has mentioned, which makes the country already vulnerable to the illegal cutting of trees, desertification, land degradation, and drought. All these conditions lead to loss of water and food security. It is no wonder that we see more urbanization at a rapid rate, where rural population starts to move towards the cities due to barren land and lack of economic opportunities or activities. Indeed, it is also no wonder that ESCOM is insisting on building more power coal-driven plants in a country where nearly 90% of the electricity comes from coal, along with major coal exports. That is why the department will have to be informed by an approach of balancing the act, as mentioned earlier by the Deputy Minister of Minerals and Energy this afternoon. When responding and intervening on all these challenges, there is no other approach than balancing the act. If we are to meet and achieve the Sustainable Development Goal of a land degradation neutral world, where there is no net loss by 2030. In this instance, our department is currently implementing and improving on 4 of its programs to meaningfully contribute to the conservation of South Africa's biodiversity and the socio-economic development of the rest of SADC member states through programs such as transfrontier conservation areas, as I have mentioned. Under the auspices of the Expanded Public Works Program, the department continues to invest on core areas of focus such as I mentioned, sustainable land management, protection of forests, securing strategic water resources, and restoring degraded land. The department will also be ensuring that the broad-based economic empowerment, small, medium, micro-sized enterprises, that is BEEs, SMEs, are efficiently supported for maximum economic growth and job creation, especially for our youth and women in business. While we are still in the process of amalgamation of the department, we have observed that plantation forest is another program that seeks to enhance on the existing natural forest and woodlands that South Africa has. Chairperson, South Africa presently has about 1.2 million hectares of plantations. Some of these plantations are leased by government to private companies, and 3.7% of these hectares are owned by small growers. Forest contribution is around 10% of the country's or agricultural GDP. However, the balancing act approach is critical for this program, as plantation forestry comes at a cost in terms of transformed land, water and soil impact, fire risk, and loss of biological diversity. The Forestry Stewardship Council and the implementation of its guidelines will thus go a long way to bring sustainability to the plantation forestry sector. The Working on Fire program is another initiative to save our forestry. How can we forget the 2017 devastating fires that destroyed the trees and greens of the Garden Route, Port Elizabeth, where 6 lives were tragically lost in that process. Through an overarching national draft plan, awareness, advocacy, and educational programs will also be enhanced by department to make sure that more people, including youth and learners, know well about the seriousness and consequences of biodiversity loss and the reduction of ecosystem, appreciate and conserve nature more. Agroforestry strategy is an additional initiative that seeks to integrate forestry and agriculture on the same piece of land, holding a number of social, economic, and environmental benefits. Chairperson, on facts about our environment will definitely assist our ability to a collective, compliant, and indeed caring resilience on the inevitable threat brought about climate change and air pollution. These are threats that have domino effects, multiplying too many other threats, as mentioned by the Minister. We will thus ensure that our department will always act professionally and never with impunity in responding to complaints, concerns, and compliments regarding our immediate mandate. Our motto should be, environment rights is human rights. As appropriately, the 21st of March is celebrated as International Day of Forest. In conclusion, I would like to thank the Honorable Minister for her already shown leadership in this short space of time that we have assumed our new respective responsibility in this rather difficult and technical portfolio. My gratitude also goes to our Director General, Ms. Nosipho Ngcaba, and the entire team at the department for welcoming us and the support that has been shown to us already as the executive. Thanks again to the family of Environment, Forestry, and Fishery for such a warm welcome. Acknowledge our MECs, Chairperson of the Portfolio Committee and the Select Committee, and I want to say we are here to serve the people of South Africa. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister. The next speaker on the list is Honorable B.H. Holomisa.
Chairperson, Honorable Minister and Honorable Members, the UDM supports this budget vote. Koban Apha vanhu vaka-ANC. As a result, we suggest as follows. The United Democratic Movement believes that through the implementation of biodiversity programs, thousands of jobs can be created. For instance, the introduction of what I would call green battalions to combat soil erosion, overgrazing, deforestation, and to also protect biodiversity, especially in the rural South Africa. We also propose that a national climate change green fund be established. Funds that are generated through avenues such as taxing new car owners should be channeled into this fund. In the same vein, the green fund managed by the DBSA must table their programs, especially those dealing with rural areas, because we have a feeling that that green fund is channeled to the big areas in the big cities. The climate change fund could be made responsible to launch sustainable green projects that would create much needed jobs and also to contribute towards our nation's food security. It would be ideal if the Department of Environmental Affairs could coordinate and even chair any mega infrastructure development projects, such as water, housing, forestry, roads, and railways. At the moment, each of these departments operate in silos, each with different budgets and work objectives that might clash or have functionalities that are duplicated. In conclusion, there must be a master plan that is adhered to with extreme discipline, that is coordinated at the highest level. This will help with better budgeting, ensure that universal timeframes are set, and that progress might be better measured. It's time that we should consider establishing a Presidential Council on Sustainable Development, whose task would be to coordinate developments in this country. Part of these solutions lies in consolidating the massive number of environmental laws and regulations into one concise and effective law. I thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Honorable. The next speaker is Honorable Winkler.
What you see here may appear to be a simple plastic bottle, but I assure you it is far more ominous and far more scary than what we realize. By 2050, it is said that there will be more plastic in our oceans than there are fish. And if this is not enough to alarm you, let me tell you, research says we are ingesting 1 credit card worth of plastic per week. We are in the midst of an environmental catastrophe. Yet of the national estimated expenditure for this year, only 0.41% has been allocated to this department, and this has remained static for almost the last 5 years. Of the 0.41%, the amount spent on administration is 10 times what is being spent on air quality management and more than 7 times what is allocated towards integrated waste management. South Africans use between 30 and 50 kilograms of plastic per person per year, including this parliament. Our land, our rivers, our oceans are drowning in plastic pollution. Plastics have been found in the deepest trenches of our oceans and in the bellies of our marine animals. According to the World Wildlife Foundation, only 10% of waste is recycled in South Africa. single-use plastics, which
Honourable-
include packets,
Honourable
sachets,
member.
wasteful packaging, and
Honourable member.
microbeads.
Can you- Honourable member, can you
Please stop
allow
my
her,
time.
it is her maiden speech.
It is a point
Please
of
stop
order,
my
Chair.
time.
Honourable member.
You are not giving me a
allow
fair
her
chance to
speak.
speak
a
here
point
for
of
the
order,
South
Chair.
Africans that have elected me to this
Honourable
position.
member, sit down.
You have ruined our environment. We are here to
She
fix
has
it.
no right to say our land. It
Please
is our
stop my
land, not
time.
their land.
Honourable member. Honourable members, order. Honourable member, you can proceed.
Thank you, Chair. According to the World Wildlife Foundation, only 10% of plastic waste is recycled in South Africa. Single-use plastics, which include packets, sachets, cosmetic beads, and wasteful packaging, are polluting our environment. They are not a need, they are a scourge and should be treated as such. Almost 40% of plastics that find themselves in landfills are not recyclable because of their toxicity. The only way to fix this, Minister, is through tough legislation and not putting the onus of burden only on the consumer. That is your job. So much talk of job creation, but we sit on a gold mine of 17 billion worth of waste in our landfills. There are waste streams that could be used to create thousands of jobs. Waste pickers should be organized and supported in their cooperatives. The Department of Environmental Affairs instituted a plastic bag levy in 2004. Where's the money, Minister? Why is it not all being channeled back into our department so that we can challenge and face all these challenges? Honorable Minister, the environmental ethic that informs our relationship with this world is antiquated and outdated. It must be revised. It is one of the most important questions of our generation, and it's our moral obligation to do so for young people now and future generations. Thank you.
The next speaker on the list, honourable members, order. The next member on the list is Honourable TVB Mkone. Over to you.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister, our Chairperson, and the Honorable Members of Parliament, the fellow citizens, the Department of Environmental Affairs. Chairperson, one of the 7 priorities of the 6th administration is economic transformation and job creation. President Ramaphosa, during his address to the people of South Africa, said that since 2014, the government has secured investment of nearly about 30 billion and created over 7,000 new jobs. He said these investments have been mainly in infrastructure development and marine manufacturing, as well as in aquaculture. An expected investment of nearly about 70 billion is expected within the next 5 years in the sector of the oceans economy, and this is expected to create about 350,000 jobs within a 5-year period. Under Operation Pakisa Oceans Economy, we find a latent potential to help ensure that within the next 10 years, no single person will go hungry in South Africa. We have been given a beautiful coastline from the Atlantic to the Indian Ocean, rich with natural resources and minerals yet to be fully tapped and exploited for the benefit of all our people. Like Honorable Chairperson, we read in the Bible that Christ fed a multitude with 1 loaf of bread. We today look with great hope at the ocean's economy to feed multitudes of our most vulnerable, poor and hungry people, who some of them live along our beautiful coastlines. Most of these communities rely on the coastline natural resources to make a living, find employment, and create jobs. Chairperson, it is estimated that the total global market value of the ocean's economy is worth about 14 trillion US dollars. Given our vast coastal areas, our nation stands to benefit greatly. if only we exploit this latent economy. It is expected that by 2033, the total contribution to the country's GDP by the ocean's economy will amount to about 177 billion rands, and the potential high number of jobs to be created can be well over 1 million jobs by 2030. Currently, the Department of Environmental Affairs continues to support and implement 35 aquaculture catalyst projects through the implementation of aquaculture developmental zones. However, it must not go without mention that the economic livelihood of the ocean's economy depends heavily on adequate policy formulation that will deal with threats to environmental quality of our oceans. We are happy that the department has designed policies that are forward-looking and will ensure protection and sustainability of our ocean's resources by conserving its ecosystems through the use of the new knowledge. There is a greater need to ensure the participation of youth, women, and people with disabilities within the ocean's economy. This can be achieved through public awareness programs, and this must include all stakeholders, rural communities, traditional and local authorities concerned. Given the potential of this sector, we call upon consideration of increased funding in order to ensure the realization of the department's mandate. In conclusion, Honorable Chairperson, we need to ensure that continued skills development of our people in the ocean's economic sector and improve research output that will help realize and stimulate the sector value chain industries, focus more also on previously disadvantaged communities. And we support Vote 27, and we call for increased funding for the sector, given the importance of the environment and the future well-being of South Africa, and the potential of job creation by this sector. Looking forward towards creating more employers from the previously disadvantaged communities, which is youth, which also include youth, women, and people with disabilities in this sector. Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson, but I want to say, in terms of the budget, and in terms of the Portfolio Committee, Honorable Chairperson, we've discussed the issues of the increase in the budget, and we have, as the portfolio, agreed that we want to lobby that the National Minister of Finance provide more funding for this department to do that. But I'm surprised if the honorable members start to debate about that when they said even in the committee that they don't support what we are saying, that there should be an increase in the budget of this department. And we fully support that that the budget, and also members should participate in the committee so that they learn more about our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Member. The next speaker on the list is Honorable SGM Mbata.
Honorable Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister, the Chairperson, Honorable Members of Parliament and fellow citizens, I greet you all. Let me just give a background on what the current situation in South Africa, which leads to us to say we need the budget to be increased for the Department of Environmental Affairs. Maybe some of you are not aware. Chairperson, allow me to raise this, that South Africa currently is facing challenges on waste management. And let me correct it, Honorable Member from DA. It's not 90%. It's not 10% that is going to the
Honorable
disposal
members,
site.
Order.
Let's look at the study. In 2017, it was estimated that South Africa generated 42 million tons of waste. about 4.9 million tons of that waste was recycled during this period, which is about 11%. Again, let me raise that our fellow Africans, which are the informal waste pickers, the department has about 60,000 to 90,000 informal waste pickers working with waste, either at the landfill site or collecting from the household, which is a huge work for the department. We need to acknowledge and accept that waste is a resource and can contribute to the economy of this country and increase employment rate. When you look at our legality in South Africa, the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa is the supreme law, and Section 24 must be adhered to, whether you like it or not, where communities have the right to the clean and healthy environment. So mostly those communities are our black brothers and sisters in the townships and informal settlement, not in suburbs. The NEMA Act number 107 of 1998, National Environmental Management Waste Act number 59 of 2008, and the other one that is amended, it's number 26 of 2014. It was amended based on that some of the issues were not covered in the first one. For example, e-waste management, which is still a crisis in South Africa. The National Waste Management Strategy, the OHS Act number 85 of 1993, the waste management hierarchy, which is not yet up to standard. Why? It's not the Department of Environmental Affairs duty, but it's everyone in South Africa. It's the responsibility of all of us here that we must separate our waste at source. The department have got the draft guidelines on waste separation at source, and we have other pieces, good legislation related to chemicals and waste management that must be adhered to in order for us to have a clean country. Let me again say, we have good internal legislations, but the department needs to monitor the implementation. Hence, they need more HR. And where we need to review these policies, it can be done, and we need to benchmark with other countries. Let me say, we need to do separation at source correctly. It's not the role of the Department of Environmental Affairs, but it's our responsibilities, all of us as South Africans. That bottle, that was this bottle, it's being recycled by PET. So it's not going to the landfill site. Let me correct it. It's being recycled by PET. So it's part of separation at source. Waste separation is the key to improve recovery.
What is the point of order, Honourable Member?
The Honourable Winkler, in her maiden speech, she was not disrupted. This is her maiden speech, but she's being disrupted.
Order.
And she's being disrupted by her.
Order, Honourable Members. Honourable Members, calm down. Calm down. Calm down. Let us give an opportunity for the member who is making a maiden speech to be heard. And unless being provocative or controversial, right, you are not supposed to interrupt a member who's making a maiden speech. Continue, Honourable Member.
Thank you. I'm saying that waste separation of waste separation at source is the key to improve recovery and landfill diversion of waste. This is what we need in South Africa. And the department is trying its level best to do that. Remember, the department is there, but we still have the municipalities that must conduct the separation at source for the household waste collection. The greatest value is derived from recycling materials that are well sorted and uncontaminated. Waste must be separated where it is generated. Let's separate waste, don't contaminate. Every citizen must separate waste they generate at source at all time. Separated waste must be collected per category instead of being mixed in a compacted truck. But flatbed trucks must be encouraged. Western Cape, you're still using your compactors. Tonnages of waste must be reported to SAWITS. This will assist the Department of Environmental Affairs to monitor waste generated, reuse, recycled, and waste recovered, and have data for research studies and improve. This leads to urgent need for industries developing their industrial waste management plans and municipalities developing their waste management plans as part of extended producer responsibility, EPR.
Honourable Member, your time is now expired. The next speaker is the Honourable Hendricks.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, Honourable Minister. Congratulations on your appointment. We need new blood in this department. I want to acknowledge the passion of Professor Leslie Green of UCT and Professor Leslie Petrick of the University of Western Cape, Dumja Slapu, Chair of the ANC in Massachusetts, and activist Rose Elsie of Fishhoek, to save this part of the planet harmed by sewage and chemical pollution. Everything former President Mandela called for on not harming the environment has been sadly neglected. The rights of the environment in our Constitution is not seen today. Raw sewage and poorly sewage pumped into waterways is a national catastrophe, and pollution, which is our worst nightmare. Sewage harbour chemical poisoning of waterways, rivers, and shorelines is worse than climate change. For 2 years, I've been an environment activist as a councillor in the city of Cape Town, and you will soon see a damning report on the harm to the environment. 3 months of investigative journalism is going to hit Cape Town. This harm has been covered by every newspaper, radio station, and TV station over the last 2 years, with no action by your department, Minister. Honourable Minister, Alzama focus on the harm in Massachusetts near Simonstown, Naval Base, and Sunflay near Khayelitsha. Your department is seen as a lame duck, as the Green Scorpions has not had one conviction in terms of the National Management Environment Act. The reason is you neglect your mandate because you delegate enforcement to a provincial director of environmental enforcement, whose directives are trumped by an appeal process by an MEC for environment who protect their political party mayors, especially in the Western Cape. Alzama has secured a horrific finding by the Human Rights Commission, 3 directors from the Director of Environment Enforcement, and a settlement agreement between the public protector and the city of Cape Town. 2 years down the line, the environment harm still exists. Minister, you must help us get a conviction so we can jail errant officials in terms of the NEMA Act. Honourable Minister, with the deepest respect, the budget does not capacitate you to arrest errant officials of municipalities, charge them and get them convicted so that they will stop harming the environment, human beings, livestock, horses, and marine life. When your Director of Environment Enforcement directives are challenged by well-resourced municipalities, they back off because you don't provide the funds for them to defend their directives in the High Court. You must not delegate enforcement to provinces, but do it yourself. Honorable Minister, we want to bring to your attention that there was a 10 million rand research project on snook near Cork Bay, and they found that 40% of the snook is diseased and poisoned, and this research was done by the University of Western Cape. Our marine life is destroyed because municipalities pump raw sewerage and poorly treated sewerage into your waterways, and your department has done nothing about it. Shame, but we hope you will turn things around. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Weaver. Is it the member's maiden speech? It's the member's maiden speech. Now, don't interrupt your own member now. Continue, Honourable Member.
Minister, we as the residents of the Highveld area in Mpumalanga are very angry, frustrated, disillusioned, and very unhealthy. Our constitutional rights are being violated. The Constitution states that everyone has a right to the environment that is not harmful to their health or well-being. However, people living in the Highveld area of Mpumalanga are surrounded by 12 polluting coal-fired power plants owned by Eskom. Last year, Greenpeace announced that Mpumalanga is the global #1 hotspot of nitrogen dioxide emissions due to these plants. In 2007, this area was declared the Highveld priority area as it was identified as one of the hotspots of poor air quality. 5 years later, the then Environmental Affairs Minister published an air quality management plan. In 2019, another 7 years later, very little has been done to change the deadly air quality of the Highveld, as people are suffering and dying. After a full 12 years of delivering nothing meaningful, the government has failed to improve the deadly levels of air pollution, and as a result, the Highveld suffers from the most dangerous air pollution in South Africa. We are angry and rightfully frustrated by promises and plans made with no implementation, no execution, no enforcement of these plans. The violators and polluters have faced zero consequences for blatantly disregarding the environmental laws of their own companies. We are disappointed and angry with government for not enforcing and ensuring these companies are kept accountable to the basic standard of compliance. 12 years, Minister, when will that review of air quality plans that you talked about earlier be completed? Minister, 14 years, old Tumelo misses school regularly due to ill health and struggling to breathe. What if it was your daughter? Lifa Pelican, who uses an inhaler a couple of times a day. What if he was your son? His respiratory problems started when he moved to eMalahleni, but when they moved away with family, they have no problems. The tragedy is that residents are stuck in this toxic area because this is where they can find employment. But at what cost? It is important to consider the impact of health on unemployment. Workers that are consistently sick are absent from work and eventually lose their jobs. Minister, do you know what happens when you go to the doctor? He tells you to leave town. Why do the residents have to choose between an income and their health, between immediate survival from a job versus your health and long-term survival? Government should be ashamed of themselves. What is the use of spending resources on reporting on air quality and monitoring if there is no accountability in the enforcing and execution of big polluters? Minister, your responsibility is to ensure that our air is clean and that the lives of our people are healthy and safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The next speaker is the Honourable Modise. It's also a maiden speech.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. Special greetings and congratulations to the new minister and the deputy minister. We greet all honorable members of parliament. We greet our guests and fellow South Africans. From the outset, we wish to express our greatest gratitude to the ANC and the majority of South Africans whose loyalty to the ANC is unquestionable and was demonstrated in the recent elections. Chairperson, South Africa's healthy environment is a key to a better life and future for all. The ANC has over the years reiterated its policy position that the goal is to help all South Africans to have a safe and healthy environment. When the ANC speaks of the environment, it includes the air, it includes the land, it includes the sea, the rivers, but it also includes the plants, the animals, and our natural resources. This does not exclude the gold that we mine in Carltonville, where I come from. The department's environmental innovation and management solutions is premised on a people-centric approach that recognizes the centrality of Batupili. We cannot overemphasize the importance of a clean and healthy environment in the eradication of poverty and diseases. These twin challenges have potential of undermining the important work of our democratic government. It is, however, important, Chairperson, that we acknowledge that our environment is one and the world was not created in piecemeal. And in this regard, we are forever mindful of the collective responsibility of all of us as South Africans, as Africans, and as global citizens. We further note that the utilization of our environment must be done in such a way that it does not shortchange future generations and the economic exploitation of these most valuable natural resources, and it must not harm the environment. The latter is an acknowledgement and a consideration that climate change mitigation as well as air and water pollution reduction are not only limited to our country, but also find African and global expression. In the past 25 years, we have made great strides in ensuring that we protect the environment for the benefit of our present communities, ensuring that we live in a clean and healthy environment. This, however, has not been the case for the majority of our poor rural communities who suffer from degradation of the environment. A threat to the environment is a threat to human life and existence. The management, protection, and promotion of a healthy environment has become a priority of our time, just like economic freedom. The world has changed a lot since the end of the Second World War, and so too has our environment. In this regard, Honorable Chairperson, we wish to remind the House and all South Africans from all facets of life about the Hiroshima bomb and its destructive effect. Because its destructive effect, exposure to human lives and environment, the effect which still haunt the world today. Honorable Chair, we stand here today to vociferously affirm and welcome the progress made by the Department of Environment Affairs and a number of progressive policies and its adopted programs. Some of the programs speak directly to empowerment of our people, those of whom would still refuse to be represented by the fellows on my left. This was recently seen in the elections. We express our confidence in programs of the Department of the Environmental Affairs, now reconfigured together with forestry and fisheries. This includes, but not limited to, the chemical waste management, the environmental programs, the biodiversity and conservation, climate change, air quality and sustainable development, ocean and coast. The NDP explicitly acknowledges that the transition to an environmental sustainable future, which is carbon constrained, would require decoupling of economic growth from natural resource degradation and depletion. We reaffirm our unwavering support to these departmental programs as they have great potential of creating jobs, as they have great potential of creating jobs, and policy realignment will also help us exploit the benefit associated with the value chain that related to these industries. These initiatives can empower participants with much needed skill and create employment opportunities, whilst at the same time ensuring that the management of natural resources and facilitating the green initiative projects in our most vulnerable communities. Now, Honorable Chair, let me quickly get down to the business of the day. Something that some honorable members refuse to comprehend. Allow me to make a quick reflection on a number of work opportunities created by the department in the 2016-2017 financial year. 98,566 jobs were created, of which 54.46% are women, and 6.31% are youth, and 5.22% are people living with disabilities. I want someone to rise and argue that this sector does not demonstrate potential to create jobs. Chairperson, it will be oblivious and devoid of reality and the prevailing socio-economic conditions affecting our people. This environment we are debating today was used to separate our people along racial lines and ethnic groups. The brutal apartheid regime created sections and divided our people into Xhosas, Sothos, and Botswanas. Now, our people reside in dolomitic areas in Khutsong as we speak. Our people reside in Alexander, in Tanzania, in Langa, and in Botshabelo. They and their forefathers chose Rondebosch, they chose Camps Bay, they chose Sandton, and subjected us to servitude and poverty. Now, they allocated at this space where there is nothing except sand and stones. Our people live in inhuman conditions, an environment where they can't even plow vegetables or trees. In some area, our people live in squalor and in the third world. Now, Honorable Minister, youth unemployment is no longer a theoretical matter in the country.
Honorable members, order.
Youth unemployment is no longer a theoretical matter in this country. It needs an undivided and intensive program of action. The Youth Environmental Service, the YES program, must respond directly to the plight of young people. Now, having met this yardstick in the 2017 and 2018 financial year, it was just an attempt to resolve the problems of our people, and we argue that more needs to be done. Chairperson, a clean and healthy environment has great potential of contributing and boosting the tourism industry in our country. It has been reported that in 2017, tourism industry contributed 136.1 billion into our GDP, and that is about 2.9 in the total GDP when factoring the value chain in this sector. It is about 412.5 billion or 8.9 of the total GDP. So the cleanliness of the environment cannot be overemphasized. But one of the most critical acts of the National Democratic Revolution is the creation of a legitimate state which derives its authority from the will of the people. Now, the Freedom Charter asserts that no regime can justly claim authority unless it is based on the will of the people. Now, the majority of the people have bestowed this revolutionary responsibility on the ANC, and we will discharge it. Now, if people had confidence in others, they would have voted for them. Now, the people have voted for the ANC, we dare not fail them. Now, as Moses Kotane once remarked, and I'm sure this might sound very paralleling like Greek to others, revolution batu. We are not here because we woke up and became members of parliament. We came here because we were elected by the people to represent their views and their aspirations. Now, if you knew who Harry Gwala is, but it's clear that you do not, he would have told you that you must defy an account later. And this is exactly what you are failing to do. Now, gone are the days where one industry is dominated by a particular race over others. Environmental affairs, forestry and fishery is no exception. The time for all our people to participate in the economic mainstream is now. We are the servants, asidlali, sithunyiwe. Now, people come here and blame air pollution on the department, when air pollution is actually white dominated, because that is the industry that is dominated by white people. Now, you can't blame that on this department. It is an industry that is white dominated. You argue, you smile, you laugh, or otherwise it does not matter.
Order, honorable members. Order.
Now, the time to score cheap points through a well-coordinated anarchy has come to an end. The term
Honorable
for
member.
empty...
Oh, will you just hold? Honorable member, don't shout at me. Okay? Don't shout at me. If you do it again, I'm going to ask you to leave the house. Continue, honorable member.
I maintain, Honorable Chair, the time to score cheap political points through uncoordinated anarchy, empty rhetoric and mindless radicalism is over. Here we want research, we want analysis. The time for common sense is over. Without any fear or favor of contradiction, the ANC supports the budget vote 27 of the Department of Environmental Affairs.
Thank you, honorable member. Your time is expired.
Oh, the time is?
Yeah, your time is expired.
11 minutes.
Yeah.
No.
The next speaker is the Honorable Minister of Environment, Forestry and Fisheries.
Honourable members,
Order, honorable members, order. The day will come, honorable member, when you will debate, and then you're going to get the same. Continue, honorable member.
thank you very much. Honourable members, I'd like to thank everybody for their participation in this debate this evening. And I think that what gives me hope and strength in facing the numerous challenges that exist and that we must confront in this portfolio over the next 5 years, Honourable Deputy Minister, is the fact that what we can see in this evening's debate is that there is more that unites us in this House in terms of our approach to policy than that divides us. We all agree that sustainable development must balance the way in which we approach our economic development. We all agree that there must be a promotion of renewable energy sources. And I think, Honourable Holomisa, it's important to say that a Green Energy Fund has already been established under the auspices of the DBSA. This fund receives private sector funding, it also receives international donor funding, and it is available for investment in all forms of projects that will promote and develop alternative energy, different forms of waste management, and other environmentally sustainable projects. We're all agreed on the importance of urgently addressing climate change, addressing biodiversity, and environmental degradation. And we agree that the Department of Environmental Affairs must be the custodian of environmental issues and must take effective regulatory action against transgression when it is necessary. And by the way, honourable members, it's not true that there's been no conviction for environmental offences. In 2017-18 financial year alone, there were 53 convictions for environmental transgressions. We agree that the department must be proactive in relation to its sister departments, and that's why when addressing the problems on the high-felt priority areas with regard to air quality control, I have already approached the Department of Minerals and Energy and also the Department of Public Enterprises. We do intend, Honourable Weber, to complete the review of this plan this year, and we do intend this year to engage with industry and to already this year get a better quality of air on the high-felt region. We agree, honourable members, that we must increase strategically our protected areas, and this would include our water sources, our wetlands, marine protected areas, and we do hope in this 5-year term to open 2 new national parks. We agree that there has to be better policing and law enforcement to control poaching and wildlife trafficking. And by the way, honourable members, canned lion hunting is outlawed in this country. It's outlawed in terms of NEMA, and it's also outlawed by the Threatened and Protected Species regulations. We agree, honourable member Paulson, that we have to settle land claims relating to protected areas either through compensation, joint use partnerships, or allocation of alternative land. We also agree that unless local communities who live in the areas surrounding our national parks are integrated into sustainable use value chains, we cannot expect them to have an interest in protecting those parks or in desisting from activities which might otherwise be defined as poaching. I want honourable members to challenge Parliament and in due course every government department that we must outlaw the use of plastic bottles for water. I see no reason why we can't have glass jugs in this chamber, and I hope that you will support me in this campaign on both sides of the House. We agree that there must be proper governance, proper auditing, and I have set a target that there must be an unqualified audit within a year in this department, and I've given them 2 years to get a clean audit, and that applies to the department and to the entities. I have also, at our strategic planning meeting on Monday, insisted that this department and all our entities introduce the open tender program so that all our procurement must be transparent and open to public scrutiny. Let me conclude with where I began. If we have such a high level of agreement on what are the priorities facing our government and the long-term future of humankind, then we have to agree that it can't just be the role of one department or one sphere of government to deal with these matters, and that it is incumbent on all of us to mobilize all spheres of government, all of citizens, and all of civil society in support of these objectives. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honourable Minister. Honourable members, that concludes the debate. The mini plenary will now rise.